Sorry.
Shut down.
Yeah,
It's
I
that
was doing
Mercury
it without a.
retrograde. That retrograde.
Well, it was I guess running updates or whatever, and I always put my updates off, so that part is my fault. And yeah, it was like, okay, well, why you not looking?
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for our first Friday Lives. We are glad to be here today. I'm actually excited about this conversation. I hope y'all are excited too. So I first want to take an opportunity to say we are missing our dear sister, Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade, but she is with us virtually and with us in spirit. And we're going to have us a good time today. We're going to have us a good time today. So we have all of our other subject matter experts, sister scholars on the line. And so I'm excited for a great conversation. So thank you for joining us. Our topic today is actually the movie Origin, which is almost kind of like a docu fiction, fictionized docu movie about the book Caste, written by Isabel Wilkerson. So we are gonna get into a great conversation today. I am joined by our resident historian, our sister Nozibele, Dr. Kenja McCray, our resident journalist Thandisizwe, who's coming with us from the West Coast, and also excited to have our professor, our literature buff, Dr. Corrie Claiborne, in the house with us today. Welcome, y'all. Our anthropologist, Sister Scholar, will be joining us momentarily as well. So, hey, how's everybody doing today?
Good, can't complain.
As I said
Spring has
earlier, I'm
sprung.
black. That's gonna be if I will stand on it. So.
I'm gonna stand on it.
Yes, absolutely. Listen, earthquakes are happening and it's spring, so you know, global warming is really global warming out here.
Yeah, a lot of pollen.
A lot of pollen. It's really spring. It's
Yeah.
It's
It's
real.
sprung.
Yep.
It has sprung. It has sprung. All right, so we're gonna jump into the conversation. I know we try to keep it to an hour. We're gonna honor y'all's time today. So thank you for being here. So I just want to kind of round robin. We can go in the same order that I introduced y'all. So we'll go Nozibele, Thandi, and then Corrie. And I just want to get overall general reactions to Origin, the movie.
I thought I've resonated with the story of Isabel Wilkerson's conception of the book, and then a bit of the process of how she researched it and struggled to articulate her thesis. I may be the villain here, but I haven't resonated with her metaphor of race as caste.
This is why I wanted us to talk about this. I'm so excited.
You cannot contain yourself. Okay, all right.
I can't, because I knew y'all had my back. I knew y'all had my back on this. And even though I loved the story, I like the theory. I like the theoretical framework. I just don't agree.
Right.
Yeah. But okay, go Thandi.
So, full transparency, or maybe 50% transparency. Have not read Caste. Have not read the book. The other part of the transparency is that I got my start in journalism at a place called NOMO, Black Student Newspaper at UCLA, one of the oldest Black student newspapers in the country. And at some point, I met a 19-year-old student named Ava DuVernay. And then fast forward several years later, I got my start in opinion writing. by a sister who happened to be named Ava DuVernay with the project that she was doing. So I am not going to harshly critique Ava DuVernay. I'm not going to go all in on her. I'm just letting y'all know that from jump. This is if you're looking for that from me, you came to the wrong place. And this is about the movie versus the book. The first thing I want to say is that I've noticed in terms of online commentary, there was so much, oh, I love this movie. Oh, it was beautiful. And that's not what I felt. When I figured out that that was Trayvon Martin in that first scene, I was like, oh, here we go. And I mean, it tugged at my heartstring, first of all, the first scene. And then I just started getting angry. It was not beautiful to me. I got angry. And all of the microaggressions that were referred to or reenacted, which, as far as I'm concerned, are macro, and they're not micro or mac, they are aggressions. It just made me angrier and angrier. So there was so there was that, right? But again, in terms of the film, I think that one of the reasons why it resonated so strongly with certain segments of the Black community is because I believe this is one of those opportunities where we get to tell white people, see how ugly y'all have been, and we get to tell other people, see how ugly they are, and we've known this about you for a while. And I think that we kind of like that sort of thing, right? Telling white folks about themselves, letting other people see how ugly white folk act, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. And then there's the criticisms of the movie, which is basically an extension of a criticism of the book, as in Isabel Wilkerson's theory is flawed, and this movie is an amplification of a flawed theory. So these are the kinds of things. These are like the sides of the coin that I'm hearing. Now there are some who, just gonna criticize Ava DuVernay because she was born Ava DuVernay and ain't nothing you can do about that. I'm not one of those people. But as I said, I'm not gonna go all the way in. That's my girl. Leave her alone. But that's how I personally feel about it. But what I'm seeing are the amplification of a flawed theory, which is problematic from an analytical standpoint, and that's the one of the main criticisms. The other, not so much criticism but praise, I think it just shows the ugliness of white people, and I think that that's kind of like Black people feel kind of vindicated, like, see, we told you. In terms of, and again, now Ava, what does she say? This film is a dramatization inspired by the book cast, The Origins of Our Discontents, and is an artistic interpretation of the author's life and writing process. So as a writer, I love hearing about the process that other writers go through. But because I have not read the book, I cannot talk about which scenes was actually okay. Did that really happen? Is this what she really said? So there are certain scenes in the film that I want to comment on, but I can come back to that. I want to take up too much time. I'll let Corrie go ahead on and speak.
We're all shaking our
You
heads
left
like,
it there. I'm like,
yeah, like, but we'll come back. We'll come back, Tiny.
yeah,
Come on in,
okay.
for
Well, same. I mean, love Ava DuVernay. And so nothing I'm going to say is a criticism of her. However,
Mm-hmm.
as I told Estee earlier, in the free screening of the film, I fell asleep on it. But that was because we had a fire alarm. It was late, right? And they were expected to have a talk back afterwards. And sometime after she got to India, I was asleep. However, before that, I will say that what I really was struck by is I love the personal story between Anjanou Ellis and Niecy Nash. I loved even the story about her husband and when she would go to people and talk and get their story. That's where I felt the most moved by the film. But like other people have said, the whole premise that caste is not race. And so you can't just talk about racism. I mean, as she's telling her black family at the family reunion, the book she's writing, and she says, well, it's like when this happens, but see, that's not racism, it's caste. I'm like, girl, what? Like, you saying this at the cookout? Like, I don't understand. Like, it is race. It is race. And the fact that you don't allow black people to say that, and it also is everywhere European people have gone in the world, they've created some problems. That is also true, right? So this becomes the fact when you're talking about Indian caste system, because their colonialism in India mattered. You're talking about some of Africa, you're talking about some of the Caribbean, you're talking even about the fact that, they colonized the rest of what is known as the UK. So when they used to talk about Irish people, they used to talk about them like all kind of ways. They were like black and they were doing witchcraft and all the stuff that they say about everybody else. So there is a European problem that I think you need to name. And I understand not wanting to specifically say something about race as a way to say, oh, well, let's talk about how it's worked out, around the world. Supposedly would build solidarity, but what I think it does is actually weaken her point, because it is very specific what happens to Black people in America. And me trying to go tell my aunt or my cousin at the cookout, like, oh no, that's not race, that's caste, that's not a useful conversation. It's not true. It's not all these other kind of things become and if you want to compare our system, there is still something that has to do with understanding how a form of American racism got exported out of the world, which she does talk about. She talks about how the Holocaust came out of American slavery, right? Like she taught, or they studied us. She talks about, the ways in which they perfected racism and this kind of lies so well here that they were able to export it overseas. But you still have to go back and talk about chattel slavery at the beginning, right? Like you have to talk about what they did to Africa, even if you want to get to these other places. So I was a little bit, and it's not to say that I don't have compassion for the struggle of other people around the world, and I don't see the similarities, but I realized this movie ultimately wasn't for me, because I was like, no, I'm back with Trayvon at the beginning with his Black self, being killed because he was Black and walking and had Skittles. That's where I am, right? So I could not go to Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon's mother. It's like, oh, well, it's really about caste. No, it is about your Black boy, and the world does not love Black boys. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting place to start. I thought the choice of that was really interesting, even if that is kind of the place where the idea started for. And I don't know, does anybody know if that's true? If that's really the place where the idea started for Wilkerson, was with Trayvon Martin? I don't know.
So she came to Morehouse and she was like in the process, I feel like, of writing that book. And she mentioned a lot of racial terror, things that happened. So I don't know. Like, I don't exactly know if that was the moment, but she was very good at documenting all of these things that have been happening and how it was like, when Black people were moving out of the South because of racial terror. So she mentioned all of that. So I don't know.
Okay, so it's connected to her, to other racialized brutality. Interesting. I'm also an Ava stan, and I kind of do want to talk about Ava as towards the end. I want us to move through cast first and the concept of it, but I actually thought the film was really, really well done. I'm more I just couldn't accept the concept. I just couldn't accept the concept. I very much so felt like her family at the cookout that was like, girl, we love you. Come fix this plate, girl. But no.
Come fix, let's do the electric slide. What are you even talking about? That's when there's family you gotta love. You be like, I love my cousin. She off. Something ain't right about her.
And it's
Okay,
it's like
like those of us who really be living life as Black people are like, girl, we are not talking about our next the theory of our next book at the cookout. We are doing the electric
What?
slide,
You know
serving,
what?
cooking, and eating the food. Talking about Boo
Cooking
Bean. You know what, Boo
and
Bean?
eating.
Pull up your pants because if it's falling down, everybody don't want to see your underwear. Well,
mhm.
respectability politics. You know what, girl?
No.
Kenja, shut up. Kenja, does anybody know what Kenja be talking about? I
You know
already,
what? Listen,
That
we're not
No,
talking
conversation
about
was
that's
that.
in
it.
2 seconds.
listen.
You
Exactly,
were
That's
like,
like,
yeah,
it.
I have to go eat
bye.
these
That's
collard
it.
greens. Like
Without
you,
How
without
much
Yeah,
book
that's
gonna
it.
be?
Mhm.
without
That
going
is correct.
without going the ADOS route, right? We just gonna pretend those people do not exist. No such thing as ADOS. Let's pretend those people do not exist. Brother friend of mine several years ago, he talked about the fact that even though Barack Obama, his mother was white, father was Kenyan, quote unquote, technically not African American, he had access to that which is African America or, African Americanisms, not through his wife, but also because of, in his words, black ass cousins. He said, black ass cousins will pull you up. Okay. Niecy Nash is her black ass cousin. They was playing dominoes. They was playing bones. You hear me? Black. That was a black ass family. Okay. And you're exactly right, girl. What she say? Say that again, but just less
Ma-
Pulitzer Prizey.
Make it
we're
plain.
worried
Make
She
it
about when
said
the
plain.
it.
food was going
Make
to
it
be
Make
plain.
it
done.
plain.
Hmm.
That's
Make
what
it
that was
plain.
the question I
Yeah.
want to know too. When is it? What's the ETA? When the food about to be done?
Why
Right?
are
Like
y'all talking
that
about
was
this
the
book?
most important question that was asked. And what about the book?
All right. And
Yeah. So
and I have a colleague who just came from a family funeral, and she was like, "Yeah, we are in black behind families, so we know um some other people in the families writing books or wrote books or they're an academic or something like that, right? They're a journalist, and so y'all three like, oh, I hear you have another book coming out. Tell me all about it. All right, that's over. I'm ready to go electric slide. Hey, do y'all listen? Do y'all know Flex by Cupid? No, let's learn it. Like, we're not going that in depth. And I wanted to redeem myself about shaking my head after Tandi's statement because she got me thinking about the scenes, right? And I was like, y'all help me. What was the scene with the MAGA guy who's supposed to be helping her with the flooded basement? I didn't ever get the point of that. That's why I shook my head because I was just thinking about that.
I think it's an American flag. It's "Make America Great Again." He's obviously feeling some kind of way, and she makes a connection with him talking about his mom, asking about his mother and father, because he was going to give her an estimate. He was like, "I'm not even trying to spend time here with you," and then she kind of quote unquote breaks through that, and he's like, "Okay, well, let me take a look and see what's going on over here." Which, okay, that's another, this empathy and we are the world and interracial, that ain't how we gonna get free, y'all. I'm sorry.
Again, it's
Yeah.
only black people. Why we got to be better? Like why we got to rise above? Like sometimes it's just
Can
like
somebody else do some work
just
here?
again.
The
Well,
point
family, we want
is
to
that
welcome.
she can
Yes, come
undo
on.
years and years of racist thinking and belief by having casual conversations that
Okay.
in a moment will help him really see her humanity and see her as a person.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that
Was that the
talking about their parents is going to undo all of the
hundreds
philosophy that
of
he has
years.
had over the years.
this is
That's
why
what
you
I
need an
think it
anthropologist
was.
on your team?
I
'Cause
mean, the idea, and I really wondered, right? And this is when the dramatization of the book of Isabel Wilkerson's life plus the book comes in. And I'm like, does she really think that? Like, I was really interested to think that, does she believe that if we can connect on some level, or if we believe that it's just all cast, if we can convince people to understand this, somehow will they get over their biases and racism, and will they do something about the Dalits in India and all? I mean, I would love it, but I mean, there's nothing in our history that proves that knowing the truth, because she even says that people know, they know that this is not true, right? And they do it anyway. So me talking to some MAGA person, do I think he would go out and still talk about Black people, maybe hunt and kill Black people? Absolutely. Like, I have, and this is growing up in the South. I know you can be very kind to people and then at the next day be at a lynching, right? Like, can be kind to people. And then at the next day, like I remember the 16-year-old girl in South Carolina who was, you know, on her cell phone, and she's kind of brutalized by this police officer. You know, he breaks her arm, all this other kind of stuff, as a way of taking her out the class. And it was, you know, they wanted to prosecute him for violating her civil rights, et cetera. But of course, the girl got in trouble. Here she is, a child, 16, and was like, but how is she really a child? You know, she could have been grown, and she was mouthing off. But in that, it came to all of this stuff at the end. Well, the white racist police officer who had all these excessive force charges, usually by Black, you know, against Black people were charging him. They said, oh, well, he has a Black girlfriend. So, and I was like, what does that have to do? Like, Strom Thurmond had a white child. He like literally, you know, paid for this dorm where she stayed at South Carolina State. But at the same time, he stood in front of the state house with, you know, saying that no nigga was ever gonna go, you know, that they were going to integrate anything. And so this kind of like, oh, well, he gave money to South Carolina State and that was his Black. Okay, but you understand that you can be close.
He probably gave money
to people have compassion. They can raise your children, as she says, Toni Morrison says, but in another time, right? They could turn around and murder you and kill you, act like they don't know you, wish the worst for you. And so even they're like, oh yeah, we had a moment. Yeah, a lot of people had a moment.
Strom Thurmond had a Black child.
Had boyfriends, right? I'm sure that, you know, whomever else, you know, George Zimmerman was Hispanic, right? I don't think it literally matters when it comes to getting into the crux of white supremacy and the way that it works and the way that it operates. So I was really like, I really wonder if everything that this woman is as a Black woman in America, all the things that you researched, do you get to a point where, oh, well, we can just have a discussion and then.
That's a great segue, Corrie, because I was very interested in the interplay between her academic experience and who she was showing herself to be, you know, in her personal life. And I wonder how you all reacted to seeing that, to seeing her show her kind of academic process on screen while showing her life process alongside it. What was you all's reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's not like she just sat around ruminating after smoking a spliff. You know, she actually went to libraries. She actually went to countries and talked to people, which is another criticism I've heard. She goes into places and talks to scholars and academics and intellectuals elsewhere, but we don't see, and like I said, I have not read the book, but in the film, we do not see her talking to Black African American scholars about our history and our condition. We don't see her interacting with them. We see that there is one book that has had the most impact on her by Allison Davis, and I forget his wife's name at the moment, but this is the Black couple that leaves Berlin as Hitler is taking power and they return to the South. So this is the book that has had the most impact on her thinking. These are scholars who are long gone by the time that Isabel starts her research. No other black scholars you can talk to, nobody else you can converse with. Could it be that they might debunk your theory and now you have to start over from scratch? I don't know. But I did appreciate the fact that she is going to libraries. And like I said, she wasn't just sitting around at the couch puffing and ruminating. I wonder what happened in Germany in 1932. She wasn't doing all of that.
I had a little bit of issue with the way that she did her research. And I
Mm,
know Dr. McCray, I don't know if you will be able to, Corrie or Estee, or Tanya, we have this discussion all the time in terms of how you report something based on the scholarship of your discipline,
mm,
right? There's a difference between reporting and scholarship.
mm,
And I think in the cause of, in her case, the way that she presented, she made it seem that Allison Davis' wife was also an anthropologist, but she wasn't.
mm,
And Warner's wife was an anthropologist and she wasn't. One of the things that was common for the day was when an anthropologist went in the field, a lot of times they took their wives as well. And the women would type up their field notes. The women would talk to the other women. And even though they were doing work that could be classified as ethnography, they weren't given credit and they weren't anthropologists per se. So
mm,
when she talks about Allison Davis and his wife and Lloyd Warner and his wife, they're nowhere on the credits in terms of the research, in terms of the way that she's doing. And I think I read a couple of articles that she did elsewhere in terms that she's saying, oh, anthropologists are looking at caste, and anthropologists, talk about caste. That's not really necessarily true, from the term of an anthropologist. So we do a lot of times when they talk about caste, they look at it in a different way from the way that she's portraying it. And I know she's trying to say, okay, caste is a system that you're born into. You can't get out of it. There's no negotiation. But if you look at the caste in India, the way that it was set up, there was no mobility, right? If you were born in the caste of the untouchables, it's not like you can go to school in India and work really hard and then all of a sudden be able to matriculate. No, it was certain jobs that you were forever barred from doing. And it's
mm,
not necessarily like that in the other societies that she mentioned. So to take this broad sweeping idea of caste and try to apply it to systematic racism, I think that is dangerous. And I think that is not necessarily true, because it's not really going to address all of the systemic issues that we have that comes from that. And you just can't say, okay, America is a caste system because we had Jim Crow laws and we had segregation, without accounting for even Allison Davis. If you look at him, his father was a lawyer. His father was an abolitionist lawyer. His son ended up being a lawyer. Allison Davis came from a middle class family,
mm,
right? So if you're looking at that, he wasn't in what she would definitely place as a caste system. So that whole idea of America as a caste system to me is flawed and it needs a little bit more interrogation.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know we were going to go that deep into it, but that was. I don't like the way Thandisizwe you talked about the different debates that you encountered over this movie. And the ones that I was, I guess, engaging with were along the lines of what Nozibele just said, which is that it's much more productive to address what is actually going on in the United States. So United
mm,
States says it's an anti-caste society for all intents and purposes. So saying no, what you're really doing is as caste. It's like Dr. Claiborne is saying, it's not a very productive conversation. We need to talk about what really is going on. And a lot of historians, for instance, are saying race acts as a measure to permanently and continually be a way to declass African Americans. So
Mhm.
class does exist in this society, and it's a society that says you should have a measure of social mobility, um, economically, right? And
Mhm.
so when African Americans, like you're saying, like Allison Davis, do, say for instance, become very educated and the like, race rears its ugly head to declass them. But the class isn't non-existent. It's not like Allison Davis is also permanently working as an untouchable, cleaning, latrines, cleaning cesspools or whatever. No, he's actually functioning as an anthropologist who can write about this and publish about this, in part because of his parents' positionality.
Mhm.
And it's important not to ignore that, because a lot of people will be like, well, see, you can do great things in America. And it's important for us to say, no, but you're still trying to declass me with this whole race thing. We have to, I know it's hard, but we can't just sort of metaphor our way out of
Mhm.
having the intricacies of the discussion.
Mhm. Mhm. And again, I haven't read the book, but in the film, she's stressing the interconnectedness. Connection, it does not equal causation. Just because we connected African Americans, Black folks, Dalits, Jews in Germany or Jews worldwide, just because there's a connection in terms of we have all suffered oppression, does not mean that the cause of that oppression is the same. And I think that's the major flaw that everyone is talking about.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about, was it last year or the year before, how Whoopi Goldberg got suspended from The View because she said that what happens with Jewish people is not racism. And, people flamed her like, what? Like, the way they treat Jewish people, you acting like it's not important and da da da. She's like,
That's,
no,
that's
they're
not what
not
she
black. Like, they don't experience racism because they are white, right?
said.
And then it was this central thing where, and so they suspend her and make her apologize, because it is as if to say, we want to make all oppression the same. And whenever we want to have a real conversation about the way that it's different, this causation and correlation, I think, comes back. We're not allowed to have a unique experience as Black people, right? Like, we're not allowed to say that this is that thing. And that is what I think at the basis of this movie, it was, and maybe the book, and I haven't read it, and I hate to talk about things when I haven't read a book, but I haven't. But at the base of it, I was like, and I think that's where it breaks down. And I'm really interested as to why, like, Oprah was like, oh, well, this book has to be one of my picks. This has to go, around the world, because I was literally thinking, what if we made Ava DuVernay made a movie about Anna Julia Cooper's A Voice from the South, or what if she made a movie about souls of Black folk, for that matter, or you name it, right? Like, if you want to pick any kind of thing that sort of talks about a phenomena, that I think you could still globalize, right? Like, I think you could still talk about souls of Black folk, and still talk about African people, still talk about other kind of people. But so why not do one of those books? And I don't know. I mean, this, to me, again, I go back to, this wasn't for Black people.
Mm, mm,
I found myself asking over and over, who is this for? Who is this for?
It definitely wasn't for us, right?
mm,
Because I think on some levels it eases guilt, right?
mm,
Because it makes it seem as if people aren't targeting individuals, right? That, the Make America Great Again guy was just a victim. Because at some point in her film, she talks about that, not only are the oppressed suffering, but the oppressors are suffering as well. I forget whichever term, she didn't use oppressed and oppressors, but I think she probably used the victims of racism versus racists. They suffer in a way too. So I think that her book was targeted to that population as opposed to the actual people who were being oppressed or marginalized.
Trying to find my notes and I don't see it. But yeah, no, it wasn't for us.
But that's my thing. When is a movie going to be for us? Because even we sort of had this conversation about white saviors that they put in different films, and you could always they don't want to make a film if it's you can't even have Black Panther, but you got to have somebody white in Wakanda, right? Like there's always this moment where why can't it just be us? Why can't it just be about us?
And it's not like that in the comics, to be honest.
Well, I don't know if I see how that eases guilt. I'm trying to see how you conceptualize that I should feel less responsibility because it's a system that's everywhere.
But this is an interesting moment with book bans and this anti-CRT. I mean, literally, they're passing laws in states that say you cannot make people uncomfortable. So in that kind of level, you can't even, in some school districts, read about Martin Luther King because when he talks about this, the other America, what do you mean other America? Isn't it the same?
Right.
Why was there a difference? Right? So if we are literally at this part where you cannot make people feel uncomfortable, we're just gonna ban the book. Oh no, we can't read that because God knows Toni Morrison just wiped out around the country, right? From Virginia on down. Why? Because she said, right? She's gonna talk about slavery, she's gonna talk about sexual abuse, she's gonna talk about all this other. Oh well, we just gonna ban it. So we're at that moment. So it does not surprise me that this movie would be made in that moment. But does it really? Can you prevent? And that's the single question. You cannot control somebody else's feelings. So passing all these laws, they know has nothing to do with people's, being uncomfortable. And there's nothing you could do to make them comfortable. Slavery's hard. I don't know what else to tell you. Deal with it, right? I made it.
Deal with it. And I think Estee, the way that it can do, because when you look at being a racist and racism, right? Those are things that an individual can do conceptually, right? If you think about the way that the word is practiced, right? Even though there is a such thing as casteism, or being casteist, a lot of times when you talk about, even though we understand that racism is institutionalized, right? Casteism takes the I'm trying to figure out a way to explain it. Casteism, in a way, takes the agency off of the people and make it seem as it's less institutionalized. And you won't have people going around talking about their caste as one, because it's not something in American culture, at least, it's not something that is reinforced on a daily basis. So to abstract casteism is in a way to take personal responsibility away. Am I making sense? Are y'all understand?
Yeah. I mean, I'm following you. I just it's an interesting nuance. It's an interesting nuance. But yeah, I'm following you. So then I wonder, where do we see ourselves and what's happening with what Wilkerson is trying to do with this connection? Is there a place where we can see some congruency with how we experience race and how we know race to function both in theory and in practice?
And I just want to say, for the record, the person that she talks about, Warner, that did the Deep South with Allison Davis, he was really into casteism, and he was an anthropologist. And at the time, his whole idea of caste was rejected by the American Anthropological Association. He received a lot of pushback in terms of that idea as America being a caste system. When I looked at other anthropologists, talking about the United States having a caste system, is very few. And it's not something that's widely accepted because of the ways that anthropologists, explore and the way that they look at the issue. They recognize that caste is really complex and you just can't slap one label onto something because you also have to take in the cultural context, right? India, for the most part, has one tradition or religion. America has a multitude of it. Even within the Christianity, we have a different denominations and we have different sects. So having a caste system that's rooted in religion, right, is not something that we can easily do here. So for her to have a broad sweeping statement that anthropologists accept caste, as a way to do it is not necessarily true.
So it's like I can't talk about the movie without talking about the book, and we're supposed to be talking about the movie.
We're
And I
talking
haven't read the book, but I know what the criticisms are of the book, and just seeing what's represented on the screen, even though it's an artistic interpretation, I'm like, nah. And what I'm reacting to is like, this just seems like such a simple glossing over of a very, very complicated yet straightforward phenomenon of what African people, particularly in this country, have experienced historically and currently. It's just too simple for me. And it makes me kind of wonder about her, which I didn't want to go there, but I'm going to go there anyway. Like, why is this being promoted? Why is this being lauded so much? I don't want, and I don't want to, I don't know, I don't have the history or the connection with Isabel Wilkerson that I do peripherally with Ava DuVernay. So I don't want to seem like I'm attacking Isabel Wilkerson, but I'm asking the question. It's like, okay, because of my proximity, because of the folks that I run with, the African centered or Afrocentric Pan African nationalist community, we knew about Dr. Ambedkar. We knew about the Dalits, primarily through the work of Runoko Rashidi. And before that, you have the Dalit Panthers that were modeled after the Black Panther Party. You knew nothing about Dalits, really? Okay, that's kind of worrisome to me. A lot of people don't know about Dalits. Okay, but I'm just saying, you didn't know? Wow, okay, all right. So I'm just, I'm not trying to, not trying to attack the system. I'm just like, this is an awfully simplistic analysis that's just being heralded by the U.S. right about now. I don't know.
And that's what my thing is. So I'm just thinking about just the trajectory for a book. So Warmth of Other Suns now cast. Where do she go from here? Right? Like, what do you imagine? Do you think she has anything else that she could tackle that's in this trajectory? Like, I don't know. I don't know. And like I said, the most compelling part and the part that I felt the most compassion about was all the loss that she experienced, the sort of trying to hold it together while, doing research while she's also figuring all this stuff out. And I feel like, it was these big answers for life. So I do feel like, the story itself was worth watching. But I just don't know, like I said, where it leaves us, where it leaves her. If you started with a book about Black migration and the history of Black people, and then you want to go to, okay, well, let's look at, well, it's not race, actually. It's this other thing. Okay, now what you gonna write about, girl? Because you already said you ain't gonna talk about race, so you're not gonna come back to Black people. So now where you gonna go, right? Like, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So while I haven't finished Cast, I've started it. I recommend The Warmth Over Other Suns, which is Wilkerson's first book. It's a really, really, really important read. It is phenomenal work. And I have looked to see kind of like, I'm like, okay, I'm interested theoretically in where this is going. And I don't see her, from what I have looked at, similar to Nozibele. I've read articles and other things since I haven't finished Caste. I see her talking about Caste. I see that that's kind of where she seems to have hung her theoretical and academic hat at this point. So I do think it's important to see that this is kind of where she has taken her theoretical trajectory. I mean, it's yet to be seen if maybe she has another book coming. I don't know about that, but from what I have seen, from what I have read, it seems like Caste is where she's hanging her hat. And I do think it's interesting to be navigating Blackness and family and grief and loss and mamas and cousins and Black ass cousins and right, don't nobody know that shit you talking about. All of that while having to navigate this framework in this way. So I find that I find it very interesting. I do want to pivot us as we get ready to wrap up in our last 15 minutes or so to talk about the movie itself and Ava. So,
well, real quick before we do that,
come on.
I want to recommend an article by Dr. Sharice Burden-Stelly, and of course I've forgotten the actual title. It's either Caste does not equal race or Caste does not explain race. Sharice, Charisse, Burden, Burden, Stelly, Stelley.
Thank you, Tandy.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So I want to shift us a little bit into talking about Ava and the movie. So this movie was not funded by any major house. When we think about the Hollywood machine, there are major film houses that kind of fund all of the films that we see that hit the screens. This movie was not funded that way. Ava felt very personally tied to telling this story, wanted to tell this story. Now, it was clear to me that from watching the film, which is why I love it, I actually recommend people seeing it, is that she was really trying to capture Isabel's story. I think it's important to be in conversation about the theory, but it seemed to me that Ava was really trying to capture Isabel's story. But it did not get any funding. She actually ended up going to like the Ford Foundation and other nonprofit and philanthropic resources to be able to get the funding for it to be made, for it to be distributed, and that's why it was like a limited release in the way that it was. So I'm interested just kind of in thoughts or reactions around that, especially for Ava to be at the place where Ava is, where you kind of would think by now Ava could tell whatever story she wanted to and somebody would give her $5 to do it. But that's not at all what happened here.
Well, somebody did give her $5 to do it. It just wasn't the Hollywood studios.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is we got a nickel and dime Ava at this point, because that's a nickel and a dime. That's, you got to rub 2 quarters together if you got to go to the Ford Foundation. Lionsgate put a Tyler Perry mama story.
Well, from what I read, saw, or heard, she didn't even feel like going in the room and asking them people for money, because she knew she was going to either have to explain it too hard, or she felt she was going to get turned down. Let me just go over here where I have a relationship. She had a relationship with the dude. Is a brother who's over the Ford Foundation, who I think may have even provided her with money for the 13. So she's like, let me just go on back to this well and draw from here, as opposed to going over here to these folks, I think.
And I think it's
in the interviews I watched of Ava, I saw 2 interviews about it. She didn't characterize it that way.
Oh,
now, but they were like, one was on GMA and the other one I can't remember, but I saw 2 different interviews, and she was kind of like, she pitched it and they didn't want it. And then she was like, well, I want to make it. So, I mean, maybe she didn't fight, you know what I mean? That, but she pitched it to the studios for sure.
Okay, she
Yeah.
did initially.
And
Okay.
I think one of the things that we have to remember is that Hollywood is in the business of making money, right? And they are banking on, like, how well did her last film do? What has she done historically? And just because African Americans love Ava doesn't mean that everyone loves her. So when you look at it, they're looking at how profitable can it be. So you have a movie about a Black woman, written by a Black woman, directed by a Black woman. So that's not going to flat. That's not talking about being a prostitute. It's not talking about, doing drugs. It's not talking about being a single mom. It's not about, having your boyfriend be in jail and you ended up having sex with his racist security guard so that you can win an Oscar about it, right? So it's not in any of those types of things. So they're not going to fund it. They're just not going to throw money at it, no matter how much we love her, no matter how much we want it, because ultimately, when you look back at it again, it's not perpetuating the racism and the inequity that Hollywood banks on, that the
Even,
larger public wants to see. Now,
even,
if you threw in that she was a single mom, that her background was that she was a crack baby, and that she had to navigate all of those things in order to write her dissertation. And maybe when she went over to Germany, they thought she was a Jew and threw her in the thing, then maybe they would have funded it. But a
but
story
all
about a smart, highly educated, middle class African American woman, they're not going to do it. And it's not because of caste. It's because of racism.
because all manner of trash by other folks gets greenlit, and they get second chances after it
All
makes
manner of
money.
trash.
All manner. It's like, how did this get greenlit? It's a movie about a pig. Nicolas Cage. What do you? Huh? I don't even understand why you accepted that script, let alone how did it get greenlit. Let me hush.
And
Calm
they
down.
still making movies and looking at stuff. If Woody Allen and Roman Polanski went to Hollywood saying they wanted a movie, they'll probably greenlight it immediately.
Like
Warrants and
Chucky
all.
about to come out with a movie. I already know it's gonna be some kind of something about his life story. I'm like, hell, I've been clutching my pearls, all the stuff that's coming out by him. I was like, oh, now I feel bad. It might be worse than R. Kelly, but yeah, they'll make a movie about him now. They will.
Oh God. Yeah, now that and the Diddy movies, I'm sure that'll come out. I don't want to see. But so the other thing I loved about what Ava was doing, besides the agency that it took to get this film made, I really appreciated her telling Isabel's story, and I really connected with the themes around grief. I really thought that was just palpable of like, you know what I'm saying? Like you kind of finally get your mama situated a little bit, and then, you minding your business, taking a bubble bath, and your husband, just up and leave you. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about that would have taken out. That's the kind of thing that would take a sister out.
Yeah.
The love of your life, your mama, and now your cousin, which is in our tradition is basically like your sister. You losing all three of them for that would have took you out. That has taken sisters out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh Lord, that would have took many a sister out and has taken many a sister out. So I feel you about that in terms of relating to that.
Yeah, I would love to hear you all's reaction, because even the timing of it, the transition of the death of her husband and her mother were about a year apart.
Mm-hmm.
It was 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's in the throes of doing this book, right? So like that feeling of being a woman who is in one of your seminal projects, and in the middle of that, the love of your life gets out of here and goes to this ancestral realm, and then your mother as well. And so for me, the devastation, the grief, the heartbreak. I love the scene where her cousin comes and gets in the bed with her and just like lets her cry, and lets her break. I thought just the imagery of those things, even the imagery of the love, the imagery of the interaction between between Isabel and her mother, and Isabel and her mother, her husband, and like the family dynamics of that. I just thought all of that just really, it really kind of brought the story together, and it humanized for me this Black academic. It humanized this person who, has a life that's also built around the work, where she's traveling to do her research, where she's constantly having to negotiate that with the demands of her family and these relationships that are so important to her, and then having this kind of like heartbreaking, gut wrenching loss in the midst of that.
And
How did that land for y'all?
That representation of that portrayal is another reason why so many Black folks loved it. They could relate to it. They saw themselves writ large on the screen. Their life was reflected back to them.
And it brings me back to the film that's actually my favorite Ava DuVernay film, which is I Will Follow. And I don't know how many people have seen that, but it is. I mean, it's like I almost want like go walk, don't run, go watch this movie, because it is kind of about, a young woman's relationship with her aunt who loved rock and roll, the song I Will Follow by U2. But it's just so, and to be it's like a Black woman's story. It's like sort of like about vignettes. And this reminded me so much of that, right? Like, and I was like, I literally need to go watch that film again, because I love the way that she does relationships with family. And I think that, and maybe that was what I really wanted, like do a story about Isabel Wilkerson, and you could talk about some of the theories and how she comes up with the ideas. But I felt like that was, for me, the story, as opposed to, what she was theorizing about.
What are these? Nena, Estee, who you writing? What are you writing over here in the corner in these notes, girl?
That was a side conversation.
Why are you breaking the fourth wall, Tandy? You got these are people you can't have in the cookout, because they're gonna tell you what happened in the kitchen, and we outside right now.
Watch up on the screen. I thought I was supposed to read it. All right.
No, ma'am. As we get ready to wrap up, we thank y'all for joining us. Origin is a well done film. We support Ava. We support Ava.
Even though it made me mad.
Yeah.
Go watch I Will Follow. That's my recommendation.
I know we're closing up.
Yeah, go ahead, Nozibele.
But I have one bone of contention to kind of like point out. Well, many, but this is the one that I'm going to focus on right now.
Okay, give us two.
All right, so she's talking about caste, right? And in the film, I remember a point where someone was doing yard work and she didn't ask for something, and the guy wouldn't do it. So some white guy who she never met comes across the street and not only mansplains and tells him, like white man style, you're going to take that away or you're not going to get paid, right? So we're not going to interrogate that at all, because that's like sexism and racism, like wrapped into one. So that may be another conversation. But how could she not realize that?
They covered that in the
I mean, he dealt with it, right? He dealt with it in a conversation with her. But my question is, he dealt with it, and he came to her and he was like, okay, I mansplained and I did this, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is she's talking about caste, but she's not going to interrogate why his conversation was more successful, looking at it from a race and gender perspective. I know he came over there and he was like, yeah, I'm not trying to mansplain, whatever. But the larger point is that his race and his gender accomplished stuff that she couldn't,
That she could not.
right?
Right.
So how does gender figure into the caste system?
No,
How
I
Mm.
does
mean, my
that
thing
align?
is, there's a lot of points upon which, if she chose to look at her theory, it would break down,
But
even
hold
in
on,
her
but
own
hold on
personal
now.
life.
In
And it
all
was
fairness,
interesting to me about the husband. Like she would say, "Oh well, nobody ever accepted him, but my mama," and blah 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 blah. When like somebody is trying to introduce her to another professor or something like that after she dies, like, oh, I know, I can't remember the background, but and then she was like, "Oh, you know, they like it's the black family's fault. Here, you bringing a white man into this space. He got treated how he's about to get treated." So one of the things I feel like that's
yeah.
really important is that she didn't want to critique. Your family has valid reasons for being suspect of a white person, and it might take them 45 years for them to say he was okay. But so what? Like that's the reality of being black in America. So I feel like she didn't do that, right? Yeah, the cousin, yeah, want to introduce her. So I feel like she didn't want to go back because she had loving memories of her husband. And even though he was like, oh, joking, like, oh, so when I'm trying to be white savior figure, ha ha ha. Even though he had that kind of joke too, along with mansplaining, she knows enough, I think, in her, I think trying to deal with her grief, maybe that's why this is what the movie is about. But she doesn't want, I don't think that she was in a mental place to deal with the fact that they were different, right? Like they did have different, there are things that he could do with this white man that she could not do. And so it wasn't just caste. There were some differences, and it doesn't make her closer to this person because now, you know, which is sad that he died, but you know, he had a very different experience than her, right?
Well, I just wanted to say that when that situation happened about the yard, he wasn't her husband at that point. He was
You
the
know,
neighbor across the street, and they began to date after that. That was all I was going to say. Hey, where'd she go? Woke up back.
Which was interesting to me, even because I, I because her class is clear throughout the film, even with the mama, right? Like, you know, most black folks, if something happening to your mama, she got to go down to the Shady Pines, and we got to put her up, and we got to get on Medicare and see if she can share a room. You know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, mama's out here on tour. You know, she getting they got agents, and you know, they had nice high-rise facilities.
The
Like
dad was a Tuskegee Airman.
right. So
Gosh.
I think that for me too, her proximity to privilege, I think really informs a lot of how she's seeing and interpreting the world, which then I think does get layered when you marry a person of the global minority who has white privilege. I think that does impact how you experience the world. And it is interesting to me that was a moment of attraction. That white savior moment was a moment that created attraction. That was how it stood out to me personally. I was like, that's not
I'd be
sexy.
like, you all the way up there here in my yard? What you talking about? All right, thank you. No, I ain't coming for your house for no
I
cake.
feel like that would have been a conversation. It depends. I'd be like,
That would have been the
I don't know why
extra.
you thought you could
Like,
just walk across over here and tell him what to do, right?
like I can handle it. I can't speak for myself. Like, that was true.
Yeah,
That
which
would
for
have been for
me,
anybody though.
yeah, as a black woman, like, first of all, me and the dog would have been like, who are you in my yard? Why are you?
That's the
But
secondary
first of
conversation.
all, it wouldn't have even
Primary
taken that sense
conversation.
because when he
Primary
told me he wasn't
conversation
taking the
is
stuff out, I would say,
exactly.
well, you don't want to get paid then.
Exactly.
So if you
That's
don't take
the
this out, you're not going to get paid. He didn't
okay.
see I had somebody that did not do their work. So get that money back. Now,
Exactly.
she knew how
I
to do
mean,
that
one
stuff.
thing,
She didn't have to get no
that's what
stranger.
I thought was really interesting how the cousin was like, you never had a comeback, right? Like you could never come back with nothing.
That's probably
I
why.
was like,
That's probably why.
it is such the anti-black woman thing because we always got comeback. We always got that. We quick to be like cuss our people out. So I thought it was a really great, and maybe to make sure that they know all Black people, we have differences. We can't all be stereotypical, but we would all like immediately cuss somebody out. So I thought they were clear to show that she was not that person. Although I was like, girl.
But she got Black ass family.
Yes.
We all come from a Black ass
But
family.
it's the whole, we can bring in respectability politics. We can look at maybe there were class differences among her family, but we out of time, and there is going to be a dissertation, a thesis defense in this room. So I got to get out. I'm at the University of Pittsburgh. So I know it's at 1:30, but I see like the person defending their thesis like,
Okay, look like I need a moment to breathe. Well, give us your parting words as we think about race and the liberation.
race and liberation.
Yes.
I think race and liberation is a complex topic that is going to take all of the disciplines input in order for us to understand it, because race is a complex thing. According to the American Anthropological Association, race does not exist. Race is a social construct, just like gender, right? And so we're going to have to look at that, and we're going to have to look at how this imagined concepts of race impacts us in the United States, right? I think we have to start there, because there's a danger for African Americans to look at our particular situation and apply it globally, right? The African people in the Caribbean aren't the same as the African people in Africa or or in London or something like that. So we have to start with what's happened to us here. And I do think that when we figure out that piece of the puzzle, we can make it generalizable enough to apply it to other diaspora African people.
Thank you, Nozibele. Have an amazing conference. Thank you for hopping on with us. All right, I want parting words from you, Thandi and Corrie. Thandi, you can go first. Race and liberation.
Love and empathy and understanding and all of those things are necessary and needed, but they're not going to free us complete. That's incomplete. We need some confrontation. We're going to have to confront systems as well as individuals with more than love and empathy and understanding. It's going to have to be some force.
That makes me think about that comment that Njamile, Dr. Kenja McCray made earlier about, the metaphors are not enough. We have to be willing to get uncomfortable and have the real discussion and not just rest on the metaphors. Yeah. It's not a simple matter.
Nope.
It's not a simple matter. So we can't construct it as though it is. That's how folks get lost, and that's how folks don't get free. And we all going. We not leaving nobody. Everybody's going to Canada. Go ahead, Corrie.
And that basically is what I was going to say. Till Black people are free, nobody free. So there you go.
There you go. There you have it. Thank y'all for joining us today. Feel free to watch the playback if you are joining us towards the end. We are here every first Friday, myself and my sister scholars doing the work of bringing our disciplines together so that we can be an engagement with our culture. So we talk about movies, we talk about books, we talk about festivals, we talk about things that are happening. We are scholars, we are sexologists, we are priests, we are writers, we are journalists, we are lovers, we are friends, we are sisters, we are Black people that want to see Black
ass cousins.
We are
Black ass cousins and have Black ass cousins.
And we love Black people. So we will see you at noon.
Shout out to Ifetayo Ojelade, Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade.
Ashe. We will see you at noon the first Friday in May. Y'all have a wonderful one.